Hello, Pedro. This is Ellen. I'm happy to see that you have sent us another set of essays. Let's take a look at what you have here. Let's start with your task one about unemployment. The given bar chart, remember we call them line graphs, but bar charts, okay? So the given bar chart shows the percentage of citizens unemployed in some Asian countries in 3 different years. Okay, fine. Overall, Philippines and India held the highest unemployment rates in the period observed. Good. Although it is not presented figures for employment in Thailand in 2012, this country showed the lowest rate in the subsequent years. Okay, I like this, but I would change this around a little bit. Okay, I would have changed it. Grammatically, it was a little awkward, and I don't think you need to mention that thing about 2012. So why don't we do something a little different? How about Thailand was the country with the lowest unemployment rates for the period. Okay, or let's see what else you could have said here. Let me think. Why don't we do this? For the years data is available, Thailand had the lowest rate of unemployment, period. So the thing that I'm trying to do here is I'm trying not to be too specific, okay? Because that's not what your overview is supposed to do. It's not supposed to be very specific. It's supposed to give a general idea. But when you start talking about the fact that it didn't have data for 2012, this for me is too specific. It doesn't belong in an overview. It belongs in your detail paragraphs. So I'm trying to be a little more general and a little more vague while still giving the information that's necessary. Okay? So let's keep going. Okay. Let's see. Singapore is showing. I don't really like this is showing. It should have been had or showed, but let's see. Singapore had a slightly decreasing trend over the years, starting with an unemployment rate of 2% in 2012 and going to less than 1.5 in 2014. Not on the contrary. Everyone uses this expression wrong. It should be in contrast. On the contrary means something very different. So in contrast, China experienced constant growth. Now, why am I making it? Look at this. You've got present continuous here. You've got present perfect here. Neither one of them are correct because all of your data is occurring in the past, 2012, 2013, 2014. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to be like flip-flopping with your tenses like this. But these tenses are both incorrect. It probably should have been just simple past. So Singapore showed, and then in contrast, China experienced constant growth without the A on the percentage of citizens without a job that remained between 4 and 4.5%. Now, let me see if I understand why you're talking about Singapore and China. So you've got Singapore, all right, you've got Singapore here. I don't understand why you've selected this data. I really don't. I don't know why you would have started out your detailed paragraphs with China and Singapore. It's unclear to me. In any case, let's see what you wrote. Between 2013 and 2014, Japan, all right, it should have been Japan's, comma, I mean, not comma, sorry, apostrophe S here. Not have, but Japan's apostrophe S figures change significantly, going from less than 3.5% to more than 4%. This is the largest variation presented in the chart. India, despite having one of the highest rates, had a lower unemployment rate in 2014 compared to 2012. All right, so now that we've finished this, let's talk about issues. So there are a handful of issues. Let me tell you what they are. First of all, you talked about Philippines and India in your overview. So you talked about Philippines, you talked about India, but then you never talked about Philippines again. You talked briefly about India. Okay? The same thing happened with Thailand. You can't do that. Just because you talk about something in your overview, it doesn't mean you're done talking about it. On the contrary, if it was important enough to talk about in your overview, absolutely have to talk about it in your detailed paragraphs. So, I was happy with the fact that you had 2 detailed paragraphs, but they're just not detailed enough. There had to be more here. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. That's the second thing I want to talk about. The third thing I want to talk about was the organization. Part of the problem was that you didn't talk about Philippines or India or Thailand. So when I read this paragraph and you started talking about Singapore and China, I was so confused. There wasn't any logic in selecting these 2 countries. It then became clear to me that you decided to choose them because you thought that you were done talking about these. You weren't. You weren't done talking about them just because you talked about them in your overview. They should have figured actually really quite centrally in your detailed paragraphs. Okay. The overview presents them in a general sort of way, and then the detailed paragraph actually gives information about them that is more detailed. I didn't do a word count. I may do one. This felt kind of small to me. I felt like you could have written more. Um, and another problem that I found is that you left out information for 2013. You kept referring only to 2012 and 2014. Only here did you talk about 2013 at all when talking about Japan. But that's not appropriate because it almost felt like there was no data for 2013 in any of the countries except for Japan. Should have mentioned something. For example, I think India's figure is really interesting that, it had this, blip in the middle where it went high. So that was kind of an exception if you think about it. All right. So there were things you could have talked about. Oh, you did say that, didn't you? No, you didn't. You didn't talk about that. So, yeah, I mean, you needed to include information about 2013. That's why it's there. Otherwise, it would have just been 2012 and 2014. Okay? So, your word count was okay. It was 159 words, but you definitely could have said more. All right, so now let's look at this and how you could have organize this. There are a lot of different ways, okay? There's no one right way to do this, but I can give you a couple of suggestions as to how I think you might have been able to do this. So I probably would have had in my detailed paragraphs information about Philippines and then India, and then I have a couple of choices. I might talk about China. So it'd be Philippines, India, and then China. Okay. Then in my second body paragraph, I would talk about Japan, Singapore, and Thailand. Okay. That's not the only way to do this. Obviously, there are more ways to do this, but I think that this is a way that makes sense. And when you talk about that paragraph, Japan, Singapore, and Thailand, you don't necessarily have to do it in that order. What you might want to do is you might want to start talking about Thailand, okay, which is really interesting because, again, there's no data for 2012. And you can say that it had the lowest unemployment, okay. You could say that second lowest was Singapore, whose unemployment rate went down over the 3 years from 2% to 1.75 and then just under 1.5 in the last year. You can say, in contrast, Japan's unemployment rate increased after experiencing a slight dip to X in 2013. It rose to above 4% in 2014. Okay, so that's one way you could do it. You understand? So you start with the first paragraph, top, second highest, third highest, and then in your next paragraph you go lowest, second lowest, third lowest. All right, so that's how I would organize this data in my data paragraphs. I hope you find that helpful. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions about this. Okay, you sent us the international marketing essay. Let's see what you did here. All right, nowadays, some individuals argue that international propaganda may lead to negative consequences to a specific country, while others believe it is positive for the society in question. I believe the benefits of international advertisement outweigh the drawbacks, especially considering its impact on local economy. Okay, fine, clear, good. Simple, to the point, concise. Okay, On one hand, in a globalized society, international marketing may increase the consumption of a variety of goods in a country. Consequently, it will impact the economic growth and also may lead to a reduction in, not on, in the unemployment rates. International fast food chain, no S here, international fast food chain advertisements in low income countries, for example, will potentially induce the construction of new stores. Therefore, it will affect local economy in several ways. Once, it will require raw materials and clients, leading to an overall income increase for the families. Okay. Um, so your structure is nice. You have support for your ideas, but there's a big problem here. Look at this statement here. An economical form of education, a necessary and economical form of education. So what you've talked about is economic growth. That is not the same thing as economical form of education. What does economical mean? It means inexpensive. Okay. And a lot of people misinterpret this. This is one of the ways that IELTS uses to check your vocabulary indirectly. Okay. You need to know what economical means. So they're not asking about the economic growth that results from international marketing, but they're asking you, how does this educate people in an inexpensive and necessary way? Okay, so you've misunderstood the topic, I'm afraid. And it's a shame because I think you did a good job in general. Okay, but you didn't talk about what it's asking you. It also asked you about spreading ideas, language, and culture. And you didn't touch upon any of that. You talked about new stores being constructed, raw materials, clients, and income increase. Nothing about language, ideas, and culture. So an examiner is going to look at this and feel like you didn't really answer the question. Okay, and of course that's going to affect task achievement. Let's take a look at the other paragraph. On the other hand, international propaganda, careful, propaganda and marketing are not the same thing. All right, these are not interchangeable, so make sure that you're clear on the differences between these two words. So, international marketing may lead to a negative impact on national industry. High-income countries may use their financial power to support their own companies in other regions of the world throughout advertisement. As a consequence, local businesses may face even harder challenges to grow. Furthermore, international marketing may be a threat to historical values and cultural events because it is easier to impact young generations with marketing, careful, than with cultural activities. Consequently, cultural aspects and events of a society may be extinct due to the presence of international advertisement. Okay, I'm happy with that. I mean, in general. Um, let's see. I feel like maybe you could have been a little more specific here. Like, how would international marketing do this? So, like, let's say, for example, Nike starts advertising in, I don't know, in China. How could this potentially affect cultural activities and the historical values, etc.? So, if you had given us maybe a sentence talking about that, I would have been a little happier. But on the whole, I like this paragraph. Okay. International marketing is an undeniable reality in a connected world. Although I believe that it has negative effects in a country, I think the benefits surpass the drawbacks, mainly because the economic consequences may help improving general life quality in poor countries. All right. So I already told you how this is incorrect. And then there's one other issue that I want to bring up. You had the positives here, the negatives here. You support the positives. So what we do in essays is we put the side we support at the bottom. It doesn't go up top. Because what you're essentially doing is you're saying, hey, look, this is what I think. Isn't it great? And then you're telling me, oh, but look at how weak my arguments are because of this. So that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. Instead, you want to talk about what you don't support first. Okay, like, oh, hey, uh, companies don't grow, and this foreign interference may be a problem for cultural values, etc. And then you want to say, although that might be true, look at all the wonderful things that international marketing does create and does provide. Okay, so that's how you want to do this. You want to put this paragraph that you don't support first and then this one. Okay, Pedro, so does that help? I hope that gives you some ideas. I hope that it gives you some food for thought and helps you improve your essays. I'd love to continue working. I'd love to see you sign up for an essay package or even for the online course, which is, of course, more comprehensive. See what you can do, see how we can continue working together. All right, I look forward to it. Best of luck.